book The Little Prince starts with a boy who draws his drawing number 1, which looks like this. He then goes to the grown-ups and asks them, "Are you frightened?" Frightened? Why would anyone be frightened by the picture of a hat? Disappointed by this answer, he goes back and draws his drawing number 2, explaining to the grown-ups that it is not a hat they're seeing, but a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. This is just a story from a brilliant book. But imagine for a second you live in a world where you see hats, while everyone else around you seems to be seeing boa constrictors digesting elephants. If you have imagined this, you have lived for a second in the world of autism. Communication difficulties are a core characteristic of autism. Children with autism usually acquire language later in their lives compared to their typically developing peers, which results in language comprehension difficulties and in reading comprehension difficulties. Now, let me be clear. Not every person on the autism spectrum experiences reading comprehension difficulties. There are people who have read each and every book there is to read and are perfectly able to tell you what each part of the book means. However, in my experience working with people on the spectrum, I have seen the case of a boy who drops out of school at the age of 16 because of his reading comprehension difficulties. Figurative language, for example, is notoriously famous to be taken literally by people with autism. I have had the case of a person on the spectrum coming to me and showing me an email which starts like this. "Apologies for the late reply, but recently I have been burning the candle at both ends." Then the person asks me, why would anyone be speaking of candles in an email that is not about candles at all? And more importantly, and with a slightly more worried voice, what do I reply? Figurative language, irony, sarcasm, long words, unfamiliar words, long sentences, phrases that may have more than one meaning are all very challenging for some people on the autism spectrum. And as trivial as they may seem, reading difficulties are actually one of the reasons for the lower educational achievements of people with autism, for the levels of early school dropout among this population, for their lower employability prospects, with only 15% with the adults with autism being currently employed full-time in the UK. And finally, reading comprehension difficulties have a devastating negative impact on the overall social inclusion of people with autism. Fortunately, we live in the 21st century, where disability and accessibility are thought of in a different way. For example, if you don't have a hand, you're offered a bionic prosthetic. If you're not able to move, you're offered a smart wheelchair. If you're blind, you're offered a screen reader so that you could still read and still participate actively in society. So the question is, what can technology do to help people with autism overcome their reading difficulties and live happier and more fulfilling lives? At the University of Wolverhampton, we have been researching this question for years, conducting series of experiments involving participants with autism. And while technology is not yet mature enough to be able to take a text document and adapt it fully automatically for the needs of a person with autism, technology has the potential to enable humans make their content and make their text friendly for people with autism in a much more efficient way. Currently, these documents, the so-called easy-to-read documents, are required by law for information that is related to healthcare, changes of policies, voting guides, etc. But one problem for the creation of these documents is that the final say of whether the document is actually easy enough or too patronizing or it needs any form of further improvement is actually based on a focus group of people with cognitive disabilities. And let's face it, not everyone who wants to make their content autism-friendly has access to a focus group of people with cognitive disabilities to receive their feedback. To address this, we have developed a web application tool called AUTOR. At the moment, AUTOR is able to tell you with 96% accuracy whether your text is easy or difficult for a person with autism, with 86% accuracy whether your text is easy, medium, or difficult for 3 separate levels of autism severity. And finally, at the level of sentences, with 81% accuracy, whether particular sentences in the text are easy or difficult for a person with autism. In the future, we are hoping to make AUTOR able to automatically convert the way text is presented, because we found that the best way to support people with autism with their reading is to rely on their strengths in order to compensate for their reading difficulties. And one of the amazing strengths of most people with autism is their exceptional ability to think in images. And we found that when we include images in text, the participants with autism spend significantly longer looking at these images compared to the rest of the participants. And they also look for information in a different way when they process web pages. 21st century is referred to as the age of information. And it has proven how access to information can change our lives in so many different ways. What autism teaches us is that it is not just about having access to information. True accessibility in the 21st century means having access to its meaning. Having access to meaning for everyone is the new horizon we should reach for. Thank you.